So I've drawn out both. I've got the lion's face here, kind of half off the page. So again, this is one of those 11 by 13 pieces of paper. I have the top and the bottom taped, but not the side, because I'm going to get his face, have the color go all the way off this side of the page over here. The ostrich, I kind of did a little more centered, but I've drawn them out too, and I haven't taped either side. I only taped the top and the bottom of this particular size of paper. Here's a picture of the lion that was sent out. So it's the one I gave you to trace is a little bit different. The ear is further over here because when I did this, I had the ear like this, and you'll see that I painted my mane over the top of his ear because my husband looked at it and said it looked like somebody bonked him on the head and he had a big old lump on his head. And so I was trying to fix that. So I painted his mane right over his ear, but I moved his ear over here for y'all. So that should help a little bit. So what we're gonna do on the lion's face is, if you're doing the lion, we're going to do mainly yellow, a wash of yellow. So I mixed some yellow and some orange in my little palette with a lot of water. So this is pretty watery because I want that part very watery, this part here. And a little more water with the orange. For the lion, I also have a little bit of blue and black over here that I mixed with a lot of water, because that's going to be this part of his muzzle. It doesn't look very gray. It's barely a color of gray that you can see there, but that's what this is, this area. So that I mixed in this puddle here. If you're doing the ostrich, you'll see there's a little bit of different color in the face. So with the ostrich, I'm going to use the same yellow, the orange. I did a little more of a pink on this part of the ostrich. So that's water mixed in with pink here. And that's watery. Did a little more probably red, but you don't need to do that. But that's this color. It's a little bit darker. I might not use that. Size brushes. What I've got here is a 10, and this particular one holds a lot of water in it. So you could use a 10 or a 12. And then when we get to these lines on either of the animals, I went down to a 6 or an 8 because I want the lines a little bit narrower here. And we'll practice that technique a little bit. But we're going to get started with the colors on the face, the background colors on the face. So we'll start with, I've got, again, my number 10 pencil. I'm starting with a yellow that looks like it got a little bit of blue in it. So I'm going to put a little more yellow in it. And this is going to be like the background of my lion's face. So I'm just putting that in. I'm going to take some of my orange, drop that in for my background of my face. For the lion also, you're going to want a little bit of brown. So if you're using, say, the palette from the library, this brown, I'm going to mix that in here with some water. That's an ugly brown. I'm going to try whatever this color is. Fix that a little bit. That's a little better brown. And I'm just going to drop some of those lines in there. I'm going to paint his ear out a little bit with some brown, and then down here under his eye with a little more of the brown color. You can work with that. On the ostrich, I'm going to use a little more of the yellow. I'm going to do some sections of the ostrich, like in the yellow here, maybe some up here, maybe this little swirl over here. There's some lines on there. You can kind of follow those if you choose. And then on the ostrich, I'm going to take this pink and I'm going to go kind of around it, let it run in a little bit. If it does, that doesn't make any difference. Maybe a little of the orange, maybe even a little darker down here on the bottom. So it looks kind of sloppy right now, but it'll come. So again, I'm kind of following the lines around, putting a little more color in. It's still pretty wet. So what you can do is you can take some of your color out of your, directly out of your pan. So I have like a kind of reddish color here. I can drop some of that in and make it a little more vivid. Follow these lines around a little. That's directly out of my paint palette and mixing them in. Looks a little better. Since the paint is on the paper is already wet, it's kind of running with it. That's okay. That's good. I'm going to come down on his neck a little bit. Let it go out there a little bit. Looks like it needs a little more yellow to me. So I'm going to get a little more yellow and put in some of my lines here. This yellow that I'm getting, I'm taking that directly out of my palette again. But since the paper is wet, it's going to bleed into the red and that changes the color on it. Probably put a little more of the red over here so it gets a little bit darker. I'm going to set the bird aside for a little while. We're going to do his eyes more gold. So I think I'm going to put on the ostrich, if you want to put a little more of the red around the eye, because we're going to make this part yellow and then the very center dark. So if you want to work on that, back to my lion, I'm going to get a little more of the orange. Make some lines going up. Might take that directly out of the palette and run it in. I think he needs a little more brown. So you could take, there's something called a raw umber or a yellow ochre. Those are all kind of this browny color. I'm going to make his ear a little more brown. If you've got, some of you have like a paint type called Kiritaki. Those are very opaque colors in there for the most part. Those work really well on this particular picture. In case you've got that and you're using them. I'm running some more yellows and oranges. I'm going left and right on his face, just so it kind of makes the nose kind of come down the middle. A little more red over here. It's getting awful watery on mine. So I'm gonna have to let this dry a little bit on this guy. We're gonna paint the black in a little later. If you're working on the lion down here on his muzzle part, that's where I've got the blue and the black kind of mixed together into a color. Just, it makes it a soft gray. When it dries, you'll hardly see it on the paper, but that's all right. Then you at least know you've got kind of a muzzle going. So I'll kind of, I guess I'll move this up here a little bit so you can kind of see that. I'm just kind of painting his muzzle down here. His mane will come around the bottom all the way around it anyway. And we'll paint his nose and his mouth black or a dark color. Once
Joe, could you move it up? It was hard to see.
See if I can. How's that? A little bit better? Here's kind of the lines that I had drawn. Here's his ear. I'm going to take my tissue and soak up a little of this because I've got some weird puddles going on. This brush holds lots and lots of water in it. So when I do that, when I paint it, if I don't dab off some of the water, it gets very, very thick or runny. If you have kind of a, you could mix yellow and brown together to give you this kind of gold color. There's also a color that some people may have if you've purchased paint before called quinacridone gold. That's a good color to use on here. Or if you have something called burnt sienna, that's kind of a reddish brown. That also will drop in nicely here. And define his ear a little bit more. Muzzle. Okay, I think I need to let him dry for a little while before I go do any of the black. If you've got a yellow, what you could do is we can do his, well, we might wait. The eye, it should be drier around the eye before I touch that. So I'm gonna leave that for a little bit because the eye on the lion is the yellow as well. Back to my little ostrich person. Looks a little scary at this point, but don't worry. I'm gonna take more directly out of the pan now, not because I've got the watery stuff down. I'm gonna refine some of the lines again. So I'm going to take kind of a reddish color and go more around there. My paper's still wet. You see how that ran? But I can take it down here. What I'm using right now is something called alizarin crimson, kind of a reddish, pinky reddish color. I'm getting my brush fairly full of water, but so it doesn't get too stripy for the face part. But when we do the, when we end up doing the mane or the feathers, we're going to have a lot drier brush than what I've got right now. But this way, I'm just kind of letting the colors run into each other, spreading them around a little. Kind of following some of the lines I drew on there. Okay, I think I'll take this down a little bit here. Again, we'll be painting our lines out. So I'm going to let these guys dry for a little while. If you have a scrap piece of paper, what we can do is practice how we're going to do our lines, like these lines. So again, those are going to be a little more opaque, but I'm going to grab a piece of scrap paper here. And you could use that same size brush if you want. Sometimes it's nice to use a little bit smaller if your picture's a little smaller for the bird feathers. This is a 6 or an 8 size brush number on it, but it's still a round brush. And again, if I take it and dip it directly in my color in the pan, get it pretty thick on my brush, what I'm going to do is, as I go around the animal, I'm going to stroke away from me. So I'm going to hold my brush fairly upright, and I'm going to go like that and kind of pick it up at the end. So if you can practice going like that, and that's what's going to make your feathers or the mane on your lion. I'm going to try the yellow. I'm not sure if the yellow in this one gets very opaque. So you want to find colors that get very thick and opaque. That's why you wanted to go directly out of the pan. Let's see how that, oh, it goes pretty good. So that's what we're going to be doing with all sorts of different colors. So we just mix them up. We'll end up putting some of this in. This is that burnt sienna that looks real good on the lion. But once you get all these colors in, I mean, I've got greens and purples and everything in there. So this is the purple. Now you'll see this, see how it got kind of white? That's because it's too dry. The paint in the pan is too dry. So I'm going to take water in my brush and just get a little more water in the pan. So it gets a little thicker, but not too dry. So see the one next to it? So the difference between these two, you want it to look like the purple on the left, not the one on the right. But that just is putting more water into the paint itself, into the pan, and letting it sit in there and soak a little bit. We're going to use all sorts of other colors, greens. Here's a green that looks real good on some of it. Here's a bright green, but again, I'm going to go like this. And as I go around the animal, I'm going to turn my paper so I can go out. Go like that, go out. So stroke away from yourself. That's kind of how it's going to end up in taking shape as we go. Let's see how I'm doing on drying time on these guys. His muzzle is still a little wet. I think it's a little drier over on this side, a little drier down by the neck down here. So I can start on him. He looks okay. The lion, my lion is still a little wet right around his ear and up his nose. We'll fix that in a little bit. Just so you can see on the ostrich, I'm going all over his neck here. So his whole neck is getting covered. So that's all of this is going to get covered. And on the lion, it's basically around the edge of his head is where he gets covered up. So it's going to look a little bit different. But we can get started with our opaque colors. So whichever animal you're working on is fine. I am going to start with a lighter yellow color. And again, I'm going to stroke away from me. So I'm going to turn the ostrich sideways. So he's kind of sideways to me. I'm going to take a little water soup up my pan of yellow. Get it pretty thick in there. And I'm going to start just over here where it's not as, where it's drier. And I'm just going to start going out with some yellow color. I'm going to space them on this bigger piece of paper. I'm going to do it every couple inches. If you paint over with other colors, it's not a big deal. Going to go out from his neck. And I'm going to start going down the paper. So if I'm looking at him upright like this, these feathers are going to start coming down a little, so I can go around and then come out this side. So as I turn them around, I go this way. I'm going to go away from me again. Every once in a while, I take more water and mix in the paint, so it gets kind of like a heavy cream. Just periodically go. I'm going to turn them a little more. A little more. I'm going to turn him back around this way. I'm going to work on the top of his head or the back of his head a little bit. So what I did here is I drew, like right off his eyeball, I drew a little more pronounced line going curving down this way and another one curving up that way. There's a little bit of space in here, a little V space that I'm not going to put my stripes in, just because ostriches have a little gap there in their featherage that I saw. So I'm going to take my yellow, and go down like we're going around his head. And then we're going to go up a little bit. Maybe not quite so curved, maybe just more a little straighter off the top of his head. Going back a little. Coming out this side. So there's a bunch of yellow. I can fill in what I did last time is I filled in more here in the center coming down. Oh, can't see here. After I did some on the outside, I came just down the center and kind of went like this. V, do, do, do. So that's how the feathers will look on this guy. Gonna do the same thing on the lion. Start with a yellow. I'm going to move to the orange on the lion now, just so you can see how it looks a little different while my yellow dries on my ostrich. So I'm going to go into my orange color, dip a little water in it, make sure it gets kind of like a heavy cream consistency. I'm going to start doing my lion. Oop, that one got kind of dry. Put a little more water on my brush. Go over it again. The good thing is you'll get other colors coming. So you'll be able to cover up a host of errors if you make any mistakes. So that's not a big deal. And I'm working on my orange here. I'm coming out a little. I had just drawn some test lines in there, but I'm going all the way around his head with these. So I'm going all the way around his face. I'm going to try doing his mane behind his ears this time and not over the top of him. And hopefully he won't look like he has a clunk on his head. Turn him upside down. Go out from his muzzle. Go off the page. Okay, I'm gonna move him aside for a minute. I'm gonna go back to my ostrich. And let's see, I think I'll move to a red on the ostrich. So again, painting, dipping my brush in the water, getting it soupy in the pan. And I'm gonna start going out on the ostrich. Again, here's my little V. So I'm gonna try and make sure I maintain that. More water in the pan. You can either go over the yellows, around the yellows, it all gets kind of mushed together. So either way, it's fine. Putting a few more reds in the way it looks, that's all right. Maybe I want them a little more red. Turning my paper as I go. Dip in the paint. Covering up some of my neckline here. Covering some of that up. This goes behind his face. And again, I'm filling in some of these things. So I'm turning it this way. I'm just filling in his whole neck with some color. Probably a little more up here the way it looks. Looks like it needs it to me. Some of those lines on his face will go back with black and fill in some of the lines that are drawn in there. So it'll be a little more defined. It won't look quite as mushy as this. Okay, so that's red and yellow on that one. I'm gonna go back to my lion. And I'm going to start doing this green. This is a phthalo, a blue-green color, a phthalo green is that color. And again, going around, starting around his muzzle. Different lengths, different directions, it's all good. I drew some whiskers in there. It looks like I just painted over some of those whiskers. We'll go back with black at the end and do some of that. Paint the whiskers, the black in on this one as well. You can try any color you want actually on these. It makes no difference. You come down a little into his coloring on his face. Oop, a little dry there. I'll cover it up with another color later. Ugh, that got big and blobby. That's all right. And let's see, what color next? I'm gonna go back to my bird. And on this one, I am going to start with a purple. So I'm going to take a purple, get it my cream consistency. Looks like it's driest here, so I'm going to start on that section of my bird. These are a little drier. Up here, it's a little drier. It's okay if they do run together. I was just trying to keep it a little separate, but it's not required. You could, if you decided to, keep it more monochromatic, like if you wanted just all browns and yellows and reds, you could do that. I kind of like the bright colors and all the variegated colors in it. So looks a little more abstracty once it gets done. Oop, that was a big one. It's gonna look funny. Put some in his neck here, get that going. I'll fix this big one. Later, I'll put another color over it. Hopefully it'll hide it a little bit. I got some purple going on. And that, back to the lion. So I'm looking at my lion. I've got a couple colors started here. If I pull my picture that I originally done, the lines seem a lot longer. If you can kind of see, more like a mane. So I'm going to try making my lines longer than my ostrich. So we'll see how that goes. I am going to go to a kind of a brownish, reddish brown color. This is called burnt sienna. Kind of a bright brown color. Now this is turning out to look like kind of a colored themed lion, which I didn't intend to do. Kind of turning out that way. But by the time I get the other blues and stuff in there, it might not be that way. So I'm gonna try and make these lines go a little thicker, a little longer. Again, trying to draw them away from me. Around his ear. Again, if that ear doesn't turn out, I'm just gonna cover it up like I did on the last guy. More paint on the brush. We'll make it a little more opaque. Mane a little longer. So that's kind of how I've got this one working. This way, it's a little closer to his face and ear. I'm going to go back over here and I am going to use a bright green. There's a bright green in this palette. If you happen to have a palette from the library, you would have, or some paint palette from the library, you would have these colors in there. You could mix your own yellow green. If you mix that in a palette, you'd want to use a little bit of water, but you have to use a lot of the pigment from the paint pan to mix them together. Otherwise, they'll get very watery and very light and not near as opaque as you might want. A little more the bright green on this one. It's kind of running into my red, I see. It's not dry yet. That's okay. Yeah, I got kind of thick. I got to hold my brush up straighter, up and down, perpendicular to the paper. Then it won't get like a big thick glob like it does at some times, like it's been doing on some of these. You'll see on the, like on this purple one, if I go over it with the green, keep some green going in it, turn it around. I'm going to go down his neck again, get some in color, that color in the middle, kind of like a V shape. I notice some of my paints are still fairly wet, so they're kind of running together. So I'm getting browns in there, so I might not have to put any brown in because I'm already getting some brown just by the colors mixing up. Okay. So he's starting to take shape. His face on mine is still drying. It's still a little cool to the back of my fingers. Remember how you test if your paint is dry or not by touching with the back of your fingers. If it's cool, it's still wet, and you don't, unless you want it to go give you a burst of color, you probably don't want to go paint over that. So here I am with my monochromatic lion. I think what I'm going to do is do a bright blue. So this is a blue. An ultramarine blue is this color, your purest blue. But if you have, I have a turquoise color that is really good on some of these. It's a very light aqua-y color that's very pretty, and it's very opaque, so it's kind of fun to use. But I'm going to start working on this guy with the blue. I gotta move my paint over, it's in my way. There, that should be better for you to see. Try and go around his ear again, make his mane. Turn him this way. So I can get more mane going out. A little dry out there. Color. Kind of like the blues getting in there now, gives it a little better look than just the oranges and the brown and the green. Didn't like that so much. Run right off your page. You'll notice I'm running right off the page because this whole picture is half off the page. So don't don't necessarily stop before you get to the edge of your paper. Just run it right off. It'll look more like deliberate. That's kind of how he's looking. Let's see, back to the bird. This doesn't have any blues or anything in it. So what I'm going to do is there's in this particular palette, a Prussian Blue. That's a dark, kind of a dark staining color. That's a good color to use. Another one is a phthalo blue. That's a bright, kind of dark, opaque color. That's a good one to use. Start going through with the blue. The Prussian Blue. Like, go up a little further on that part of his head. So you'll see how when I look at it on the screen, it's kind of squared off here. I'm going to start making my lines a little out here, ending out here a little further. Just because it'll give his head a little different shape, because it's kind of flat right now, like he's got a flat top. Going down. I still have my big old purple swatch there. See if I can hide that somehow a little. Might not be easy to do. Hopefully, if I get enough color on them, it won't be quite so glaring. Otherwise, we're going to call it artistic license and let it go. On him, I'm trying to remember to keep shorter strokes, just because he's an ostrich and not the mane of a lion. I'm forgetting, but if I go back in here and do some of these, cover up some of that white in his neck. Color will kind of go away. So he's taking shape, kind of with better colors and stuff. These two lines here look a little wonky. Looks like I made a circle, but it's actually one line was coming down and one was going up. So my next color that I come in, I'm going to kind of go right over that, so it kind of hides it. Again, I'm going to try and go a little further out here just to make a little rounder on that right over his eyeball. Okay, back to my lion. Lion needs some yellow, I think. Again, I'm going to get a very opaque yellow. Let's see how that one's working. Not so good. Okay, not going to do yellow yet because these other colors aren't dry enough, and yellow's too light. I should have started with that initially. I'm going to let this corner dry here with those two yellow strokes on it. I'm going to leave that alone for a minute. I'm going to show you this aqua color I have in a different palette. Again, you may have different colors, different kinds of paint, but it's this kind of, I don't even know what it's called. Let me look and see. Turquoise. That's the color name I was looking for. It's a turquoise color. Now I'm going to take that and use that just to lighten up some of these colors in here. And you'll see it's kind of a brighter blue. So if you do have other colors, on a different kind of paint colors, feel free to use them. It makes no difference what color you're using. I think it gives more of a bluey in there. Trying to keep these as opaque as I can, just because they're more bright, vibrant that way. And again, I'm definitely going to come back and do yellows in there. I'm going to do, I have another color in my palette called Permanent Rose, or a Rose Madder Genuine. So if you have a different, it's just a different kind of a pinky red color. But they're fairly intense and opaque. And I'm going to put some of that on this, get some of that red in there. I like a little more variation. This one's a little watery, even in the paint pan. I had a little too much water in it, so it's a little lighter than I want. I'm going to soak up a little of that water in the paint pan. I just take my paper towel and dip it in the paint pan so it's not so watery in it. I got a lot of water sitting on top of the color. Around, do some of this color out. Pretty watery there too. Get it a little more opaque. There we go. That's a little better. The thinner the lines you want, you keep your brush a little further off the paper. It makes that thinner line. If I push down harder, it's going to get a lot thicker and wider like some of these. So depending on how you want your colors to, or your lines to look. Like the reds on that a lot. And I think once these dry a little and I go back in with yellow, it'll bring out a lot of that. A lot of the paints that people have, there's something called a sap green. It's kind of like it's not the bright green like we had on this guy. It's not that bright green. It's not yellow green like that. It's kind of more of a bright grass color green. I'll show you on this one what it looks like. See, it's more like the grass color. That's a good mix to put in there as well. So if you have something like that in your paint at home, I think it looks good to add that in and use it. Trying to keep my strokes a little longer. Again, go off my page on this side because he's halfway down the page. So you see he's starting to take kind of a better shape. There I pushed down on my brush a lot, got kind of thick in there, kind of like this one over here as well. And if that's the look you're going for, that's perfectly fine. Okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start working on some of the outlining on the face on this one. My ostrich face is dry. I'm gonna let some of the neck on my lion, the mane on my lion dry a little more. But I wanted to go over the some of the more facial features and stuff here. I am still going to finish this and this, but I want to show you these other things. So what you would need is a little brush. Again, I think I can do this with my 6 round, but if you have one with a number 4 on it or something, that would be good to do these lines. If you're using as big as a 6, you want to make sure your brush is down into a very fine point, so that when you're doing the lines, they stay a little thinner. This is going to be black. If you don't have black, you could use a very dark brown. That would work as well. Again, if you have the black from, or the paint container from the library, you can use that. And what I did is I kind of just outlined, pulled my brush actually, I'm also going to dab it just because see how much paint water was in it. And I'm just going to kind of outline, not exact, but just kind of give myself an idea of where the outline is of this bird's. I might come in and do some of this line. I got a little thick, that's all right. Fairly abstract bird anyway. Might try and draw some of these lines in. Hold it further upright, I'll be better off. I don't know if you can see your pencil marks underneath the paint that you have on it, but there's kind of a black circle around his eye here. So I'm painting that in. Ooh, shaky hand. This ostrich also has eyelashes. It's a girl ostrich. Don't know what that's called. But I had drawn in a couple eyelashes for her. For him. And I'm drawing them out from that black circle around the eye. That one got, this middle one got kind of long, but that's all right. Trying to make them curved little eyelashes for her. Probably could have curved up a little more. This middle circle is also black. Now, just so you guys know, on the picture, the eyeball's yellow. Should have painted that first because obviously the black will cover it right, would cover it right up. And I don't want it to necessarily bleed into the black, but this particular black seems to be drying fairly fast. So I might be able to go, I'll just have to wait till it dries completely and then go back in and do this yellow. And then I'm going to do almost maybe a little bit of orange, but mainly yellow, bright yellow is what I want to do with that. That's pretty much it for this ostrich, I believe. A little bit of a more of a mouth thing there. What you can do, if you want to put a little shadow, is you can rinse out your black brush just a hair and run it along this bottom chin, I guess you'd call it, of the bird. And it puts a little shadow down here and gives it a little gray. I'm looking at my eyelashes. You can't see them very clearly, I don't think. So I'm actually going to make them a little thicker down at the base so they stand out a little more. A little more obvious that it's an eyelash. Fix my circle a little bit, my eyeball. That's a little bit better. I'm going to leave this one. Let's go over to the lion. So if you guys are working on the ostrich, you want to add more colors, you can. Some other colors to the feathers. If you want to put a little more, this got kind of orange on mine. If you want to put yellow over the top of it and brighten some areas up, you could do that. I would wait a little bit longer to let that black around the eyeball dry. And what we're going to do with our lion, first and foremost, is not the black. We're going to paint his eyeball because his eyeball is yellow as well. So I'm going to, I gotta turn him sideways here. His eyeball doesn't go all the way to the edge. It's round inside there. So I'm gonna make a little round. And I'm gonna outline this eye in black anyway. So most of this is yellow. So I'm gonna let that eyeball go and I'm gonna work on his, and let that dry for a while. So we can work on his snout here. On this one, I did his snout kind of, you can see browns and greens. If you have a real dark brown, you could use that. If you're using the palette from the library, the paints, this brown was that really greenish ugly brown. I could use that. Yeah, move this so I don't get my arm in, which actually looks probably not too bad. And make his snout. I need to keep it dark enough. It's a prettier color when it's dark. Just and then it comes down to his mouth like this. His mouth goes kind of straight. And try and turn it up and make a thinner line. Getting a little hard for me. I'm shaky.
Jill, your video turned off.
Ah, how did that happen? My cardboard.
Oh.
Oop, wait. My cardboard hit it. Ta-da! Okay, sorry about that. So I've got kind of that goofy brown there. I'm going to take maybe a little, not green because it's kind of a green shade anyway. I have a different color, darker brown, or maybe even a little black. Just kind of mix in with it. It's still wet, so it's kind of blending in a little. I think it just gives it a little prettier color. I might do a little black in there too. Oop. Might get his nose up by you. By the camera. Kind of let that work in. There, that's probably a little better. It's got a bunch of different colors in it. His mouth and his nose. Then if you take his eyes, my eye is still drying. I don't know how dry your yellow eye is. But if you rinse out your brush and go to your direct black, if you've got that, the regular black color. And I'm going to put the little whiskers on his nose. Had to soak up some of that water. Just making some, his whiskers go off here, so I'll be doing those in a little bit. And then some over here. Maybe a little thicker because it might be a little too small. Something like that. And then I'm going to do his whiskers. They run from like here out into his mane, from there out to his mane, and there out to his mane. So I'm going to get it like I did for the eyelashes on the ostrich, get it fairly thick. And I'm going to try and keep a steady hand. Soak up a little extra water there and draw it out, going across my mane. Same thing here. And I just did 3 on this one. You can do as many as you'd like. There, whiskers. I'm going to soak up a little of this tissue. Now, again, my eyeball is still wet on this one. I'm gonna let that dry just because I'm afraid I'll ruin it. What you can do if you want to put a little more definition on his face is you can go back into, there's like a raw umber color. If you want to put more definition around this ear. If you want to do more definition up his nose, on his nose, like this one has a little more specific definition like that. What you can do is you can put your brush either back in your yellow or your orange. You might want to could start with the yellow. And you could draw some lines in. Kind of fades into the color that's there, but it'd show up. Probably gives a little more definition to his face, and it matches the mane probably a little closer if you do that. Now remember, on this lion, I'm still going to go back in and do some more yellows throughout the mane. But I've got to let all those other colors dry very solid. Oh, and I'm getting a little run from his nose to his mane. So we might want to watch that, be a little careful with that. I'm going to go into kind of a yellow, mix yellow and orange a little bit. And also do some of that. See if that adds a little depth to the face. Not too much, it needs a little darker. If you have like that raw umber, or again, a quinacridone gold, that gives a lot more definition to his face, so you can put those in. See how that makes it a little different. That's kind of a light orangey brown, or a bright brown, I guess. Not a light brown, a bright brown. And it's, since the yellow's still fairly wet, I can just wash that in there and let it run away. And probably do a little of that even on this side over here, just because that's a little too strong. So I'm going to come in with just water after I put those. Oh, no, not blue. And that's what happens. Mistakes happen. A little green on his face. Okay. Just a little water. Not so green water. Kind of wash it in a little bit there. Oh, that's how it happened. I got into his mane. I was wondering where I picked that green up. I might also do a little more around this ear. Define that a little more, and then take water in there and just kind of wash it in. Make that ear a little more defined. Take water only. I'm going to wash this in a little bit so it doesn't look so stark. There, that's a little better. Gives a little more definition to them. Again, my eyeball, I'm going to take, when it dries, I can't do it right now, but when it dries, I'm going to take some of that black line like I did on the ostrich, and I'm going to come around and do his eye, and then like this around the eye. And then this centerpiece here, it's like a little V. If you can see how it's a V on this eyeball. So that's kind of how you want it to look. Come down and make a little V like that. But again, my yellow is too wet, and that's not going to work on this guy. it's just gonna run all together, so that would be ugly. Back to my ostrich, it looks like my black around his eye is done, so I can actually go in with kind of a orangey yellow or a yellow. Soak up some of the extra water. And because I already have the black in, I have to be a little more cautious than if I was smart and did the yellow first before I did the black. So note to self, lightest color first, because then you get things like this. And it's harder to fix. So I'm just gonna drop in some yellow, try and stay away from the black. It's touching the black on some places. My black is running into my yellow a little bit, but hopefully it's not too bad, that it's dry enough that it won't look too bad once it dries up. If it does, I'm gonna let that yellow dry and I'll do it again. Do the yellow eyeball one more time.